Germany's entire defense is subsidized by the American taxpayer. There are thousands upon thousands of American troops in Germany today. Do you think that the American taxpayer is going to stand for that if you get thrown in jail in Germany for posting a mean tweet? Of course they're not, right? So the point that I try to make to our European friends, and I think that there are friends, I believe that, I know President Trump does, is that friendship is based on shared values. You do not have shared values if you're jailing people for saying we should close down our border. You don't have shared values if you cancel elections because you don't like the result, and that happened in Romania. You do not have shared values if you're so afraid of your own people that you silence them and shut them up. So let's have shared values. Let's defend democracy. Let's have free expression, not just in the United States, but all over the Western world. That is the path to strong alliances in Europe.
I quite loudly backed Vivek Ramaswamy when Trump was considering his VP pick. And I still like Vivek a lot, but I have to say, I was wrong about J.D. Vance. It does appear that he has what it takes. Whatever it is, he has it. I've been very impressed with him. The courage with which he represents his convictions and speaks them to people in positions of power with what appears to be reckless abandon is what we need desperately, and it's what I've wanted from us, the people, broadly. Particularly during the lockdowns, I was like, come on. Just talk. Just be honest. Just say how insane everything is. J.D. Vance isn't just doing that in domestic policy. He's doing that with foreign policy. And he's doing it in the faces of our allies in a way that you just don't see. You just never saw that. I mean, throughout our lives, how often did you see, Obama or George Bush like chastising one of our allies? They don't do it. And J.D. Vance famously now, about a week ago, did that when he went to the Munich Security Conference, and he read them the Riot Act about how they don't represent liberal values or democratic values for that matter, but yet they run around talking about how we have to all go fight and die and spend $1 trillion in Ukraine lest liberal democracy perishes. It's just on its face, obviously wrong and laughable. So J.D. Vance is now at CPAC. He's being asked a lot about that speech, and he's continuing to elaborate on his ideas, and I think it's worth digging in a little bit deeper. Here's something else he had to say that I thought was really, really important.
My message to young men is don't allow this broken culture to send you a message that you're a bad person because you're a man, because you like to tell a joke, because you like to have a beer with your friends, or because you're competitive. It's... Our message, the cultural message, and I think the president's and mine is the exact opposite, but our cultural message is, I think that it wants to turn everybody, whether male or female, into androgynous idiots who think the same, talk the same, and act the same. We actually think God made male and female for a purpose, and we want you guys to thrive as young men and as young women, and we're going to help with our public policy to make it possible to do that.
Now, needless to say, I would prefer that our politicians not be in the role of setting our cultural framework or having to defend young men, particularly young white men in this country. I don't think that's the role that politicians should be playing, and I don't think that we should be looking to them for guidance in those issues. However, given that we had a president and a vice president that were constantly, particularly the vice president, Kamala Harris, that were constantly condemning young white men, and the entire media apparatus doing the same thing, Hollywood doing the same thing, I do understand that this is the natural pendulum swing back. So I just wanted to preface it with, I wish it weren't this way. I wish we didn't need a vice president of the United States to actually be saying what is so obviously true, that yes, you are not evil for being a young man in America. That doesn't make you bad inherently. And it's tragic that it ever got to the place where many young men in America felt that way, because everybody in their life was saying that to them. And it's not okay. and it was never okay. And, I did what I could to try and let them know that. But I can imagine for a young person in particular, I mean, if you were, 10 or 15 in the mid 20 teens, it's like the bombardment must have been unbelievable. And to have never lived as an adult in a time where that wasn't the case, it must have felt as if like this is just how life is. And it shouldn't have been. So I just wanted to commend JD Vance for having the courage to say it. I mean, yes, he's saying it at CPAC. That's kind of feeding red meat to his base there. But the fact that these clips will go viral, and that I really do think that what we're seeing, not just from Vance, but from Trump and the entire Trump administration in round two, is yes, it's the pendulum swing back, but in many ways, it's a very healthy swing back. And for the most part, it hasn't swung back too far, too hard. I think it has swung back to a place of sanity, of obvious truth, of things that should have always been obviously true that we somehow got away from for over a decade. I mean, viciously so over the past 5 years. Probably over the past decade has been viciously so, but it started a couple decades ago, and it just got totally out of hand. It does seem as if we're coming back to the land of the sane. About damn time. Not a moment too soon, because I hate to imagine what this country would look like had we not come back to some semblance of sanity. We got very close to the cliff on this one. Despite the fact that this is heartening and that this is a good thing, I'm still very concerned about the damage it has done to both gender relations and race relations in this country. That you spent so much time. I mean, I've pointed this out before, but the entire rise of the Tate brothers and the Nick Fuenteses of the world, and some even more hard, right figures out there, that it was natural, that it was the natural consequence of demonizing people and them not being, guilty of what you accuse them of, and them necessarily, binding together with one another, or kind of congealing around one another based off of immutable characteristics like race or gender, whatever, or sex, I should say. And it's like, that's just natural. And the natural swing back is to go too far, is to then want to alienate people that don't look like you, and to despise women because you were being told by many women that you were the problem. And so misandry creates misogyny. Racism creates racism. Like, these are all very natural developments, but it doesn't make it okay. And I don't think it makes it okay in its inception when you're demonizing young white people. And I don't think it makes it okay in its consequence, which is then the young white people banding together and becoming racist towards everybody else. I would like to see that pendulum go right there, right in the middle. Now, will that happen? No, that's not how pendulums work. They swing. So it will swing. It probably has swung too far to a certain extent. But I think for the most part, we are not going totally nuts here. And this is a step in the right direction. So kudos to JD Vance for throwing his hat in the ring in this discussion, as I think it is a valuable one. Niall Ferguson tweeted out something that JD Vance actually responded to, and he's an author. He works for he's a senior fellow over at the Hoover Institution, and he said this. He posts a quote. It says, "This will not stand. This will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait." George H.W. Bush on August 5th, 1990, full quote from John Meacham's biography. "Future history students will be asked why this stopped being the reaction of a Republican president to the invasion of a sovereign state by a dictator." So obviously what Niall here is doing, which, by the way, I believe he debated Scott Horton, and Scott obliterated him as he normally does. Niall is not the worst. There are many worse political analysts out there, but I am not fond of him, and JD did not hold back. So this is what he says. It's a very lengthy reply, but I think it's one worth hearing. "This is moralistic garbage, which is unfortunately the rhetorical currency of the globalists because they have nothing else to say. For 3 years, President Trump and I have made two simple arguments. First, the war wouldn't have started if President Trump was in office. Second, that neither Europe nor the Biden administration nor the Ukrainians had any pathway to victory. This was true 3 years ago. It was true 2 years ago. It was true last year, and it is true today. And for 3 years, the concerns of people who were obviously right were ignored. What is Niall's actual plan for Ukraine? Another aid package? Is he aware of the reality on the ground, of the numerical advantage of the Russians, of the depleted stock of the Europeans, or their even more depleted industrial base? Instead, he quotes from a book about George H.W. Bush from a different historical period and a different conflict. That's another currency of these people, reliance on irrelevant history. President Trump is dealing with reality, which means dealing with facts. And here are some facts. Number one, while our Western European allies' security has benefited greatly from the generosity of the United States, they pursue domestic policies on migration and censorship that offend the sensibilities of most Americans and defense policies that assume continued over-reliance. Number two, Russians have a massive numerical advantage in manpower and weapons in Ukraine, and that advantage will persist regardless of further Western aid packages. Again, the aid is currently flowing. Number three, the United States retains substantial leverage over both parties to the conflict. Number four, ending the conflict requires talking to the people involved in starting it and maintaining it. Number five, the conflict has placed and continues to place stress on tools of American statecraft, from military stockpiles to sanctions and so much else. We believe the continued conflict is bad for Russia, bad for Ukraine, and bad for Europe. But most importantly, it is bad for the United States. Given the above facts, we must pursue peace, and we must pursue it now. President Trump ran on this. He won on this, and he is right about this. It is lazy, ahistorical nonsense to ask as appeasement, or to attack as appeasement, every acknowledgement that America's interests must account for the realities of the conflict. That interest, not moralism or historical illiteracy, will guide President Trump's policy in the weeks to come, and thank God for that. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Preach, JD. Preach. I could have written that. I have written things almost exactly like that. So, when I read that, I was like, fuck yes. Say it. Say it with your chest, homeboy. Man, so important. I mean, is there a word of that that's not obviously true? That yes, this has been true for years now? That no, Ukraine was never going to defeat Russia and claim back Crimea? How many times did I tell you that? How many times? How many times did Dave or Scott or Tom or anybody else, Mearsheimer, how many times? Hundreds over the past 3 years? Because it was obviously true. Because they never stood a chance. But just to have, one of the main talking heads in favor of continuous U.S. aid and support for Ukraine to get just pilloried by the Vice President of the United States publicly, declaring with full confidence everything we know to be true. Just as we know that young men are not the problem in this country, we also knew that Ukraine wasn't going to win this war and that the aid that we were shipping to them was never going to actually be to our benefit. There was hardly even nary an argument in defense of that thesis, because there was hardly one to be made, because it was obviously on its face to our detriment, not to our benefit. And also, it jeopardized all of us with nuclear war, which JD chose not to delve into that topic, and I understand why. So yeah, good times. Good times, and as best I can tell, JD Vance on his current trajectory, if he can maintain even a semblance of this kind of fire-breathing, truth-telling, courageous speaking, he's got a real shot at the White House in 28. A much better shot than Vivek does at this point. And I, for one, am all for it. Not because I love the Republicans, as you know, I do not. But because it would be nice if we actually had some people in politics that could, push our ideas forward. That peace is okay. That prioritizing America and Americans is okay. That sounds fine by me. That maybe our national debt is an issue. That government corruption is a problem. Any problems there? Nope, I haven't seen one yet. So yeah, it's headed in a direction that's better than it was. And for that, I'm appreciative. And for that, he will at least get my consideration when it comes time to decide on who will be the president in 28. And at this point, I don't see anybody challenging him. I don't see how he's even any shadow of a doubt, unless Trump gets some constitutional amendment to run a third time, which I hope doesn't happen, to be honest. I think JD's got it in the bag so far. And I think it's very interesting, the shift. I mean, just the The Overton window, which had literally been just shifted over to, or I shouldn't say literally, but you know what I mean. The Overton window, which had been shifted over to a panorama of pure madness, has now been shifted back to what is honesty, what is true, what is real, what is actually scientific. As opposed to trusting the science, we are now once again challenging the science. We are actually thinking a little bit here. It's so refreshing. It's refreshing. What a refreshing experience to have a politician, the Vice President of the United States, who's actually saying real things, honest things, truthful things, obvious truths. It's insane that we ever had a time where that wasn't the case. But I don't know how we go back after this. Once you have a political class which is actually seemingly being truthful with you, how do you go back to the Obama years? How do you even go back to the Trump term 1 years? You really can't. People are going to get accustomed to this. They're going to expect action. They're not going to want to hear or see fiery speeches on the congressional floor with a letter that declares, we're investigating this. They're going to want to see people perp walked. They're going to want to see the Epstein list disclosed in full with prosecutions. They're going to expect you to actually care about the deficit. They're going to expect you to actually look at the corruption and then prosecute the people behind it. When it comes to our budget, USAID, the IRS, he's auditing DOD, for God's sakes. They're talking about auditing Fort Knox. Our gold reserves, are they real? Are they there? Are they tungsten? Are they gold-plated or are they solid? We don't know because there hasn't been an audit in forever. But once you do these things, how do you put the genie back in the bottle? How do you go back? How do you put 77 million people back to sleep? Those that actually support what's happening. And I'd argue there's more than 77 million people in this country that actually support the trajectory of things right now. How could you not? How could you not want more honesty? Do you really miss the comfort of being lied to 24/7? I don't. Fucking hell no, I don't. I love this. I love having someone tell the truth. It's all I've been asking for. Now, will it turn into prosecutions? Will it actually amount to everything that I hope? We'll see. But this is the first step along a pathway of many, and it's a great first step. As always, today's episode is brought to you by mypillow.com/lockdown. Look, Mike Lindell didn't get to be that handsome by sleeping on some bullshit sheets, all right? He got that good looking by sleeping on the Giza sheets from mypillow.com/lockdown. They also got clothes. They got towels. They got kitchen equipment. They got pet stuff. Are you freaking kidding me? This is your one-stop shop for everything awesome. mypillow.com/lockdown. If you want to support the show, get yourself some comfy stuff and live that Clint Russell life. Get cozy. mypillow.com/lockdown. Let's get back into the show.
What I'm doing now is the most exciting job in the world. It's a hard job, not an easy job. It's a nasty job. But I will tell you that there is just nothing I could do to enjoy my life, whether it's that or anything else that you'd ask, because this is the ultimate. I mean, I had to make a big decision, and it was a very risky decision, because if I would have lost, my life would have been a much different life. It would have been a very nasty life. They were going after me at levels that nobody's ever seen before. Not Andrew Jackson, not Abraham Lincoln. But nobody was treated like me, nobody. And I will tell you, you learn a lot about yourself. But there's nothing I'd rather do. I had to make a decision, do I do this? Because if I lost, it would have been very, very bad. It was dangerous, actually, very dangerous in so many different ways. And I decided to do it. And I said, I have to win, because if I don't win, I spoke to a friend of mine the other night. He said, if you lost, it would have been it was actually Sean Hannity just before we did the interview last night. He said, boy, if you would have lost, you would have had a tough life. You would have had a very tough life. So there was a certain amount of courage involved in this decision to run. And it's a great honor to win by this much, to win all 7 swing states, the popular vote. Popular vote doesn't get won that much by Republicans for whatever reason. I think that's changing, because, again, we're the party of common sense, and they're the party of some real bad things. And I think they'll change. I think they have to change. It would be wonderful. I'm going to be having lunch with some of the Democrats next week, and it would be wonderful if we could work together. I think working together would be great. But they have to change. You can't get elected on the programs that they want, and that's really what America wants to see. So there's nothing I'd rather do than what I'm doing right now. I wouldn't have run. If I thought Biden was doing a good job, if I thought they were, I wouldn't have run. Because, as I said, it was very dangerous to run in a lot of ways. In fact, my ear will show that when you look at it closely. My ear, I have that throbbing feeling every once in a while, but it was dangerous in a lot of different ways. But he was so bad that I had no choice but to do it. If I thought he was doing a great job, I wouldn't have run, and I would be very happy. I actually wanted him to do a good job. I was saying, do this, do that. I'm telling them, do things. They should have done what I said. And but I would have been very happy not to have run, and frankly to have seen somebody do a good job. But our country was going to hell, and I really sort of had to run.
That's a clip from a speech that Trump gave last night, and I thought it was very interesting in a couple ways. I mean, first off, I think he's obviously telling the truth about the Democrats, that they're going to have to change, because I don't think that they're electable in their current iteration. I mean, I'd be very, very surprised if they can continue to run on the progressive agenda and the woke worldview and expect to reclaim anything, particularly if Trump's presidency is successful, which as of now, it looks as if it's on a trajectory for a decent amount of success, if not a lot. So if that's the case, they're toast. I mean, they're toast in the midterms, they're toast in 28. They're going to have to change. And I'll show you a clip from Pete Buttigieg in a minute or two that I think is indicative of exactly what I'm describing. That you're going to see a moderation amongst these people, that they are going to become moderates once again. This whole radical agenda of being, how far left can I be? How concerned with racism must I be to get your votes? That ship is sailing, thank God. But I thought that the other really interesting aspect of that speech from Trump is that he seemed to really acknowledge, and I don't think that it was, even though he is prone to a little bit of bluff and bluster, and ego and aggrandizement, I think that he was being honest, that his life was really endangered in running for the White House again. I personally think that yes, the attack in Butler, Pennsylvania was real, and I think that the near attack in Florida was real, and I think there's been countless other attempts on his life that have not received as much publicity as those ones did. Obviously, the Butler one being the most graphic and the most coverage, rightfully so. But on top of that, I mean, he only briefly hinted at that. I mean, I don't think what he was specifically talking about was even, the existential threat to his life, but moreover, the judicial threat to his life that he was going to, had he lost. I don't think that there were still many pending cases. Some of them I think are still open, felony charges that were seeking to put him in prison for hundreds and hundreds of years. And even if they got just a few to stick, it's very plausible that he would have spent the rest of his life in prison. And that doesn't even begin to include, the actual physical threats of violence to him. But then on top of that, the charges that people like his kids were facing and the investigations that they would have undoubtedly faced had he lost in this election. So I think it's true. I think he took a huge risk. And in some ways, or in many ways, I think that's the best evidence as to why he is approaching round two so much differently, why he's taking swings when he has the bat back in his hands, as opposed to, waiting to see if it's a ball or a strike. He's just swinging out of his shoes because he knows that the bat will not always be in his hand. And I don't mean it in a violent fashion. I just mean it in a baseball fashion. Like, are you going to get some hits or not? And he's going for the fences on everything. And he's swinging at everything. And I think it's the only way to go about this, because the way the opposition works when it comes to Trump, and he learned his lesson, and kudos and credit to him for figuring this out, that if you move slowly, if you try and collaborate and cooperate with the people that hate you, well, they're going to outplay you because they have more people at their disposal than you do. The only advantage that you have, President Trump has, is first mover advantage. You get to set the frame by which the debate is actually held. They also try to do that to him. They would just concoct stories. They did the Russia collusion and all that. He's like, I'm not waiting for any of that. I'm going to move so fast and create such havoc that they have to be on the defensive, that they have to be dealing with the frame I set for them. Brilliant. I don't know if it was Roger Stone. Shout out to Roger, big fan and now friend of mine. Super fucking weird. Or if it was Steve Bannon, or if it's just Trump, or if it's JD Vance, or if it's Vivek giving some advice, or if it's Elon. I don't know. Maybe it's all of them. But the new tactical angle that they are approaching everything with is exactly what you have to be doing. Because if you don't, then you deal with a bunch of, like, if you don't immediately try and fire as many FBI agents as possible, they are going to set you up again, if not worse. And you know exactly what worse means. So you have to fire them. You have to put Kash Patel in there. If you don't want to have another lockdown period, well, then you better have RFK in there so he can purge whoever was responsible for 2020. If you don't want to have endless wars that derail your second presidential term, well, you better put someone like Tulsi Gabbard in there, or the dude who negotiated the ceasefire in Gaza. I'm blanking on his name right now. He's doing everything right tactically. Now, that doesn't mean that he's coming up with the right solutions at the end of the day. I'm just commenting on his tactics. I think it's a brilliant tactical shift. Go fast. Operation Warp Speed 2.0, but the good kind. not Operation Warp Speed 1.0. Not a fan of that one. But 2.0, I am a huge fan of. This is exactly how you play it. It's perfect tactically. Now let's get into Pete Buttigieg and the shift that you're going to see in the not too distant future, if not the now, from the broader Democrat Party. Do not be fooled.
And it was a caricature of everything that is wrong with our ability both to cohere as a party and to reach to those who don't always agree with us. And we cannot go on like that. We cannot. I also think that we believe in the values that we care about for a reason. And this is not about abandoning those values. It's about making sure we're in touch with the first principles that animate them. What do we mean when we talk about diversity? Is it caring for people's different experiences and making sure no one's mistreated because of them, which I will always fight for? Or is it making people sit through a training that looks like something out of Portlandia, which I have also experienced, and it is how Trump Republicans are made, if that comes to your workplace with the best of intentions, but doesn't actually get at what actually matters here, what's actually at stake. I think, and this might sound counterintuitive, if we were more serious about the actual values and not caught up in vocabularies and trying to cater to everybody only in terms of their particular slice of combinations of identities versus the shared project, actually, if we thought about it a little bit differently, things like diversity would be actually an example of how we reach out beyond our traditional coalition. And what I mean by that is the opposite of diversity is uniformity. And if there's one thing I really respect about principled conservatives, even if I don't always agree with them, is that they have a horror of anything that has a whiff of being pressed into conformity by government or by society. So I would like to appeal to people who, whether it's because of a conservative or libertarian instinct or a more progressive instinct, or I would say just an American belief that part of the point of living in a country like this is you don't have to conform to what other people demand of you, that we're not only on board with that, we're champions of that.
When I think about Democrats, the first thing that comes to mind is they're not interested in making me conform. Just kidding. That has been exactly what they've been about for the past decade or more. Very obviously so. So I just wanted to point out that his reframing of that is interesting. It's not honest. It's interesting. It is tactically smart. I totally see the play he's making. I more than showing it to you because I wanted you to hear what Pete Buttigieg had to say and his genuine change of heart. I wanted you to see it so that you could understand what I understand about it, which I'm sure most of you do already, is that he's full of fucking shit. That he doesn't mean a word of it. That the only reason he's changing at all is because they got blown the fuck out in November. That they have zero electability under the current framework that they had been operating. Now, let's take a minute to celebrate that. That's a good thing, okay? Because just a year ago, less than a year ago, we still thought that that might be an electable strategy. God forbid. And it wasn't too far away from being an electable strategy. She still got over 70 million votes. Fucking insane. So, do not rest on your laurels, do not become comfortable, and do not buy their reframing of their obvious batshit ideology, which absolutely obsesses over diversity and force feeds DEI training down your throat across every corporation in this country at this point, or damn near it. So yeah, they're frauds. They're not actually having a come to Jesus moment or a change of heart. They're just realizing that it's not palatable. That in fact, it's been driving anybody who's even somewhat sane away. That it has been taking and pushing so many more people in the Republican Party, despite our many disagreements with the Republicans, because we couldn't possibly go along with the trajectory of the Democrats, rightfully so. So I think that this is pure lip service. This is a pure reframe on a shit ideology that ultimately still seeks to enslave you, that still seeks to force conformity on you. Pete, you lying fuck you. Not falling for it, bud. And also, you're terrible at your job. And also, all of our public transportation went to shit when you were in charge of it under Joe Biden. So your political career is over, or it should be. And if it's not, that's insane. You suck. And I don't buy any of it. The only thing I wanted to point out, too, is that that dude came out of McKinsey. He is like, as best I can tell, he's probably a CIA chosen candidate. So when you hear him talk, it's not so much about me warning you about what Pete Buttigieg is going to do as, you know, presidential candidate in 28, which he'll probably run, but rather what the deep state is collaborating on the reframing of their narrative and their sales pitch to you. Don't buy it. Well, the first half of this show has been very pro Trump so far, so let's give him a little critique. How about that?
We also have the head of Pfizer here, so I want to thank him. One of the great people, one of the great businessmen. Thank you, Albert. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I can't tell you how happy that makes me. Look, I know that Trump is, at the end of the day, he's a businessman. He's wheeling and dealing. He probably got a fat check from Pfizer, and he's just trying to do his part to continue to, you know, keep the economy moving forward. But I love, with every cell in my body, I love that even Trump, a guy who most of his fans are straight up sycophants and they will not critique him or criticize him at all. And if you do at all, they get furious. I shouldn't say most, many feel that way. When it comes to Pfizer, when it comes to Albert Bourla, they don't give a fuck. They're like, boo, this dude ruined our lives. What are you bringing him up here? Why are you, trying to pimp him out? Like, no, pass, hard pass. So I understand why Trump's doing it. I'm not going to, go overboard with criticizing him for still being friendly with the guy publicly. I understand why he's doing it, but it is a dead end, non-starter with your base. They know what's up at this point. They know what happened, and he is not their friend, not their ally, and that's about as kind as I can be about it. So you might want to stop pushing anything from pharma at this point, Trump. Just a little friendly advice. I don't think it's landing very well.
This is someone we cannot trust. This is someone who lacks the character to do this job, someone who lacks the integrity to do this job. We know that. Our Republican colleagues know that. The only qualification Kash Patel has to be FBI director is that when everyone else in the first Trump administration said, no, I won't do that, that crosses moral, ethical, and legal lines, Kash Patel said, sign me up. In the first Trump administration, as we are seeing in the second, you rise to the level of your sycophancy, and no one is a bigger or more dangerous sycophant than Kash Patel. This political hack does not deserve to be in this building. He can't do the job. He won't protect the public. He will misuse the resources of the Bureau. He will weaponize it against the president's political opponents rather than protecting the safety, the public safety of the American people.
Now, obviously, that was Adam Schiff being harshly critical of Kash Patel, who, just so you know, just got confirmed about 2-3 hours ago to be the next head of the FBI. Now, brief personal story about myself and Kash. I've only met him once. Shout out to Angela McArdle, former chair of the Libertarian Party. She invited me to be one of the speakers on a panel at Freedom Fest. I think it was last July, right around the time, like maybe the same day as the attack on Trump, or maybe the next day after. But anyways, we did this panel called How to Defeat the Deep State. And it was me, Brett Weinstein, Angela McArdle, and Kash Patel. And I'm sitting up there as a, recently deposed vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. And I'm next to Brett Weinstein, who I'm a huge fan of, and Angela, who's a good friend of mine, and Kash Patel, this guy who obviously did a good job in Trump's first presidential term, but I didn't know all that much about him, didn't know him that well. But to have him on that panel talking about how to defeat the deep state and laying it out, and I kept actually going back to him and asking follow-up questions because I realized he understood more of the mechanisms of control that and power allocation and how do you actually go about firing FBI agents? Like, how do you do that? So I'm just like peppering him with questions, even though it was supposed to be a panel. I ended up spending more time as the interviewer than an interviewee. And I came away very impressed. He has kind of a Elon on the spectrum type of energy to him. Very smart, detail focused. And I just came away like thinking this guy is one of us. Like that. Just being honest, like I don't know that for a fact. I'm just telling you, like that was the gut instinct I had about meeting Kash Patel. So when I heard his name floated to head the FBI, needless to say, I'm an abolitionist. I think the FBI has proven itself to be beyond the pale and that it ought to be thrown out, that it's probably beyond reform at all. And I believe that still. However, knowing that that's very unlikely to happen, as soon as I heard that Kash Patel might be the next head of the FBI, you bet your ass I was going to endorse that dude. And I have every day since, as soon as that rumor started. So the fact that he got confirmed today with 51 votes, about as close as it can get next to a tiebreaker, gives me a lot of hope. Gives me a lot of hope that this guy has a real shot. Now, why do you think Adam Schiff, of all people, would oppose Kash Patel so vociferously? Why is he so fucking scared? Well, let's listen to Kash Patel tell you why.
Adam Schiff is the worst criminal in Congress in the last 250 years. And what broke that we're going to talk about right now is Adam Schiff met with a whistleblower. Adam Schiff went to the podium day after day after day saying, I know nothing about this. We're not going to discuss it. We're going to protect it. And then Adam Schiff, led the prosecution of the impeachment trial in the Senate of President Donald Trump. Talk about someone who was conflicted out of the game because he was part of the hoax that brought Charmella in, manufactured that false accusation, and then peddled it out to the world. And he continued, not surprising, he's lied about almost everything in his life. But now he lied just to set up a presidential impeachment. And that's what I was talking about, these disinformation campaigns. And then he should be investigated because he lied to the world about his interactions with Charmella, who is a whistleblower, and I can't stress this enough, that started a presidential impeachment. Now, your history is way better than mine, but I can't remember the last time a president was actually impeached. It's a significant process and escalation, and it's reserved for the time when it actually shows a crime, not when it shows the manufacture of fake information to show a fake crime. The guy that found and manufactured the evidence with Charmella was the prosecutor in the case against the target of the investigation. That is the ultimate, from a prosecutorial standpoint, conflict of interest. But he knew what he was doing, and he thought he would never get exposed. And I think thanks to, I think it was John Solomon and his fantastic reporting, we now see what I've been saying for years, that I thought he met with him for sure, and it will come out, and it now has.
Those are pretty hefty allegations from Kash Patel against Adam Schiff. He's essentially saying that he framed Donald Trump for treason, which I think he did. Now, I'll let Kash handle the heavy lifting on proving that in its totality and hopefully charging him. But that is the reason that Adam Schiff is so panicked. That is the reason that he's freaking out. That is the reason that he's absolutely dragging Kash Patel's name through the mud, is because he realizes that anybody else that gets to be the head of the FBI probably wouldn't be a threat to the Adam Schiffs of the world. but Kash Patel is. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I supported Kash Patel. Because I want someone in that position, if that position is to exist, which I would prefer it not. But if it's gonna, well, then I would like for it to go after people who spy on the president and try and frame them for treason, and then as a consequence end up setting up all sorts of operations, including the Whitmer hoax and the J6 operations that end up putting my fellow countrymen behind bars for years, some of them without trial, some of them in solitary confinement. Adam Schiff played a huge role in that. Adam Schiff also, during that period, those years, was front and center on MSNBC or CNN, just peddling the bullshit narrative over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times he said something to the effect of, yes, the Trump children, the Trump family will be walking around with, leg shackles. Like, that's the type of shit he was saying. Him and Eric Swalwell.
A very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time. We have been discussing the issue of pardons that the president may offer to people or dangle in front of people. The bigger pardon question may come down the road as the next president has to determine whether to pardon Donald Trump.
Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, amongst many, many others, led the charge to try and ruin Donald Trump, not to depose him, not to get him out of power, but to jail or worse, him. And now it's coming full circle. Now all of the lies, all of the working hand in hand with the intel agencies to try and frame a sitting president for treason has backfired. Boo-hoo, Adam. I hope you're nervous. You deserve to be. You ought to be. And if I'm right about Kash Patel, you should be. We'll see. We'll see. But I've got a decent amount of confidence that Kash Patel is not playing around, that the same sort of blitz mentality, I don't want to say blitzkrieg, lest I get accused of things, but the same blitz mentality that they've used when it came to going after USAID or the border issues or ending the war in Ukraine or Gaza or whatever else, freezing foreign aid, list goes on and on, right? That they are going to maintain that tactic when it comes to how they deal with the deep state corruption. And if they do, it'll be the greatest thing that has happened in my life, because prior to this, I deeply, deeply feared what our intel agencies were going to do to us and what they were doing to Trump supporters in particular. So this is desperately needed, and the Adam Schiffs of the world are panicked, and they ought to be.
This is a very important point. If we don't solve the deficit, there won't be money for medical care. There won't be money for Social Security. We either solve the deficit, or all we'll be doing is paying debt. It's got to be solved, or there's no medical care, there's no Social Security, there's no nothing. It's got to be solved. It's not optional. America will go bankrupt if this is not done. That's why I'm here.
Just a brief segment of the Elon and Trump interview with Sean Hannity from last night, which was unbearable, but I think that particular segment was really important because, and this has been something that I've been saying for a long time, and I know many of you have felt similarly, that like our debt issue is not just like numbers on paper. It is very, very real, that it is inescapable math, that we have to take dramatic action if we're going to keep the government solvent. Now, from a libertarian perspective, I do understand, yes, we don't really care. We'd rather the government not exist. Who really owes the money? Blah, blah, blah. But in terms of consequences, in terms of like actually what happens to the people if the government defaults, if the government opts for hyperinflation as opposed to default, what does that do to civilization? Well, it ain't pretty. So whether they end up prevailing or not, I'm just grateful to have a voice in there that's telling it like it is. That, yeah, we're not going to have money for healthcare, Social Security, welfare, any of it. Like, we're going to go bankrupt or we're going to hyperinflate. Those are the choices. So which path do you want to take? Choose. You want to have some fiscal sanity for a while so we can actually keep this Titanic afloat? Okay. Well, this is what you got to do. So I think that it's just very important that, especially on Fox News in prime time, to have Elon spreading that message. And I know I have to always give the caveat yes, I don't know what these end goals are, and maybe he's just trying to blah, blah, blah. All right, yeah, whatever. I'm not commenting on any of that. I'm just saying in terms of rhetoric, it's important. That message getting to the American people in a way that carries with it the gravity that it ought to is good. That's a good thing. That's what Americans should have been being told decades ago when we were racking up this debt. And Trump, I might add, played a big role in not taking it seriously, especially with his budget in 2020, with the biggest, most beautiful budget that we've ever passed, the biggest bill, $2.7 trillion. People thought it would only be 1.7, but it was bigger, it was beautifuler, it was the biggest and the beautifulest. Yeah, look, terrible. What he did in 2020 and blowing out the deficit and blowing up the national debt was horrible. But I'm going to give him grace because this Doge shit seems to be real. What they're doing, the rhetoric they're using, seems to be real at this point. That's all I can comment on at this point. Head in the right direction. Let's keep it going. Speaking of people that are usually headed in the right direction, let's hear from Rand Paul just a few minutes ago.
Why are the decisions of this body so awful? Because there's a printing press. I had a conversation with one of my Democrat colleagues, and I said, we have to make a choice. You've got to decide whether you want to help the poor in our country or want to help the poor in Ukraine or help whoever you're paying in Ukraine. And he says, we shouldn't have to make a choice. Well, it's like, you do have to make a choice. The fact that you think you don't have to make a choice is why we're $36 trillion in the hole. You have to make choices. Which comes first, Ukraine or America? You can't do both because we don't have enough money. We only have enough taxes coming in to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and food stamps. Everything else is borrowed. So maybe able-bodied people need to go back to work. Maybe there needs to be a work requirement. Maybe, for goodness sakes, food stamps shouldn't buy sugar drinks, chips, ding-dongs, and Twinkies.
That is a good microcosm or an example of why I like the trajectory of things rhetorically when it comes to Elon and Doge, is that the libertarians of the world have been saying this for years, probably longer than necessary. Back when the deficit or the debt was less than $1 trillion, you still had Ron Paul saying, this is unsustainable. Well, it wasn't very unsustainable back then. It is super fucking unsustainable now. And his son, Rand Paul, carrying on his legacy and doing it when it's definitely necessary now, is continuing to, blow the whistle, to sound the alarm. This is existential. All of the tax receipts we bring in only cover the 4 big spending programs. Everything else is borrowed. Does that sound sustainable to you? You don't have to be great at personal finance to understand that ain't going to last. You're in a lot of trouble. But the reason that the Elon involvement matters so much is that it gives credence to the concerns of the Rand Pauls of the world, of the Thomas Masseys of the world, the guys that have been sounding the alarm for years and years and years now. It's not just the wacky libertarians that are saying it. This is mainstreaming it. This is making it so that everybody has to take it seriously. How many times was Ron Paul right? Was he ever taken seriously in the time he was saying it? No. He was taken seriously years later, almost always in hindsight. That is the nature of being a libertarian. You don't get the credit and you don't get listened to in real time. It doesn't matter. You are right in real time. It's only acknowledged later. We just have to accept our fate. That's how it works. That's what it is to be a libertarian. But Elon is helping to popularize in real time libertarian concerns in real time. This is our time. This is when people will listen to what we have to say. Not just because we're right, but because our track record says that we're right, but also because the richest man in human history is saying it alongside us. That's powerful. That is why I'm so hopeful. That's why I'm so optimistic. That's why things are looking up. That's why things are looking to improve. And that's why we've got a shot. We've got a fucking chance now. Never thought I'd say it. We got a chance. Keep pushing. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I got pretty hyped on this one. I don't know why I'm so jacked, but it's good, man. Fucking awesome. All right. Anyways, please do share it around. Actually, you know what? Do me a favor. Pick up your significant other's phone pick up your kid's phone, pick up your wife, your grandparents' phone. Just pick up their phone and subscribe to Liberty Lockdown, and then hand them their phone back and don't even tell them what you did. Make sure you set up auto update so that it just auto downloads. Just all of you do that. You could triple, quadruple the listeners of the show in a week if you did that. Just do it. Just launch me into the stratosphere. Just force feed Liberty Lockdown onto all of them. I think they would enjoy this episode. I really do. Just give it a shot. See what they say. It'll be fun. And also leave 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple, and pick up shirts like this over at toplobster.com, and check out our new episode of Dangerous RTRDS, which just aired yesterday, and I hope you guys enjoy it. We talk a little bit more about the labeling the cartels as terrorists and why I'm still very skeptical of that maneuver and why I think that it ultimately will be disastrous. It's not a big portion of the debate, but I know people always, ask me to condemn things that obviously I oppose, and it's like, all right, I did it. I'm just not doing it on this show because I just did it on the other one. So if you want to hear that, it's a great conversation. I love those guys, and it was another banger. You'll enjoy it. That's it. We're out of here. Peace.
And you people still don't get it. You don't get it. I voted for Donald Trump, black Trump supporter, voted for Donald Trump to do what he's doing. Did you expect Donald Trump to do this? Not all this. Oh, it feels so good. That's how I feel. Do you like Elon Musk? Yes. Well, yes. Yes, I do. I'm watching Democrats tell me, I thought Republicans like small government. Well, that didn't work, so we need Elon. That's why we got Elon, to help shrink it. Look what he's doing for the USAID. They're dropping their workforce from 10,000 to 300. Black History Moment. Black History Moment. Every last black that's on television seem to be all sucking off the Democrat teeth. All of them give the same talking point, the same concerns, all Democrat approved. All of you Democrat approved. Well, Donald Trump, he really ain't helping black people. He really ain't helping black people. You brag one moment black people didn't support Donald Trump. So why are you upset Donald Trump ain't supporting black folk? You can't have it both ways, but he is. What Donald Trump is doing, he's eliminating are you a DEI hire or are you a hire? Yes, and people have a right to say that. I'm enjoying every single bit of this. Friday, I'm loving it. Trump kicking butt.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it